you can start.
Awesome. Okay, great. Awesome. Welcome, colleagues. Welcome, welcome. And thank you so much for creating time. I'm excited to be hosting you this afternoon for our interesting conversation around green philanthropy as a pathway. Um, why am I all of a sudden like forgetting our topic for the day? Oh my gosh. I feel like because then we started recording, it's like, oh, now I'm feeling a bit jittery and everything. Welcome to my podcast. Can we actually rerun it? Or you'll cut it off, right, Tembi? This part.
Yeah, I'll cut it off.
Okay, awesome. Because then I'm feeling like, oh, I'm all of a sudden feeling jittery because I feel like I'm on the spot. Welcome, colleagues. Thank you so much for creating time and coming in all the way from Mogadishu, Somalia. I'm excited to be speaking to you. You guys are my good friends that we've been working in the development sector with, specifically in the climate space, and I'm excited to have you on board for this conversation around green philanthropy as a pathway to climate resilience and youth development. And my name, just to introduce myself, even though we already know each other, my name is Reekeditso Molapo. I'm from Maseru, Lesotho, and I'm an environmental activist and youth advocate. So this particular topic is very much important to me, and I'm excited to just be getting insights from both of you, Hamza and Okash, and just, yeah, like sharing with our colleagues from the African Youth Philanthropy Network. And just thanks to them once again for creating this platform for us. And this promises to be an exciting one. So without any further ado, I'm going to kindly ask you guys to briefly introduce yourselves, who you are and what you do. So yes, but this is going to be like a relaxed conversation. So yeah, it should be a nice youthly vibey conversation. So yeah, over to you, Hamza. Maybe you can start.
Thank you so much. And your name is, it's very hard for us to pronounce, but I won't dare to try, but it's good to have you here. And it's also good to have Okash. And also, let me thank the African Youth Philanthropy Network for giving us the platform to discuss these important issues at the end of the day. And my name is Hamza Abdul Wahab. I'm the current director of Somali Youth Hub. It's a platform under the Ministry of Youth and Sports that champions the National Youth Policy of 2023-2030. And one of the things that we're championing is climate that we have been focusing on for the last 1 year. And yes, I'll hand it back over to you.
You're muted, Rex.
Thank you. Thanks for the reminder. So I'm going to hand over to you, Akash. And just like a few house rules, maybe if you're not speaking, it would be best to like mute your mic so that we can be able to hear the next person well without any interruptions. So over to you, Akash. Please introduce yourself. Yeah, and we'll take it from here.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. It's actually 5 p.m. now from East Africa time, Mogadishu. So good afternoon from the coast of Mogadishu. My name is Mohammed Okash. I'm an academic, researcher, and climate champion. Currently, my role is I founded an environmental think tank called the Institute of Climate and Environment, based at Simat University in Mogadishu, Somalia. And part of my work is to conduct policy research and to challenge the systems and policies in Somali government, and also train young people who are passionate about, who are doing actual work in the local communities related to green transition, climate action, and climate adaptation. So I'm so excited about the conversation, and thanks for having me, Rex, and the African Youth Philanthropy Network. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you guys for those introductions. So yeah, I think we can definitely like just dive right into the conversation for the day. And I wanted to start with you, Okash, just to find out from you, what does green philanthropy mean to you as a young person who's working in the space? What is green philanthropy? I think there are a lot of I don't want to say myths per se, but there are a lot of conversations that go around philanthropy and what it is and what it means to us as Africans. And most people might have some sort of a misconstrued view about what philanthropy is. And I just wanted us to get into that. Maybe, yeah, get into what does green philanthropy really mean to you as a young person working in the space.
Well, thank you very much for the introductory question. Before I answer the question, let me just go back a bit and give you background. We all coming from Africa. Africa, majority of our countries are LDCs, least developed countries, and which means we have a lot of work to do in transforming our economies, transforming our social structure, transforming our governance and how we do things. So to provide a decent life and livelihoods to our people. That requires an effort, that requires a work. And so that is what's called the socio-economic transformation. That is what's called development. And you see the African Union and most of our countries have development agenda. For instance, Somalia has the new development agenda called the National Transformation Plan. At the African Union level, we have Agenda 2063. And most of these agendas will remain on the shelves if not really translated into actual things, meaning building a house for the IDBs, building a hospital, investing in schools, building, resilient infrastructure, whether it's airport, a road, supporting the local small scale farmers, and so on. So that is the development interventions required to be invested and accelerated in our countries. And one ways to accelerate those development is the perspective of financing our development agenda. And we can finance through different instruments, different means, different mechanisms. One way is to attract foreign direct investment. Another way is to access international financial institutions for loans, such as the World Bank, the IMF, the African Development Bank, and so on. But another important aspect, which most of our development, intervention is run by government or African young people or NGOs, is the philanthropy. So it's a means of supporting the development agenda. The development intervention is run by government or NGOs or young people or individuals within our communities, and that is aimed to deliver impact, which is ultimately it's improving people's lives, saving people's life, and or nature. So when we put in the context of a green philanthropy, which means now we are witnessing a new revolution, which is the green revolution. The world is now going through climate crisis, climate shocks. In Africa, every few years there are droughts, there are floods, which has a negatively impacting our productivity as a countries. We has negatively, impact on our economies, which is now dragging back to poverty cycle, poverty line. So what's more needed is to invest a lot in climate adaptation and climate efforts and those green revolutions. So the green revolution is transforming, rethinking the way we do everything almost in our life, the way we build, the way we work, the way we learn, the way we manufacture, the way we move goods and services. So that is the green revolution. The way we produce electricity, the way we adopt in industrialization, and investing, green requires a lot of effort, a lot of resources, and so allocating, mobilizing, fighting for, unlock resources for those, green revolution, especially through philanthropy, is very critical. Most of the finances are around in this green revolution is attached with bureaucracy, attached with restrictions. For example, if African country wants to get a loan from the IMF, wants a loan to get from the World Bank, it is too procedural. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of sophisticated bureaucratic processes. Sometimes when there is a drought happening currently in Somalia, and when we write for the World Bank to loan to Somalia, it might take 3-4 years. Yet people are dying. So that's like taking a long way to act and deliver results. So one of the ways alternatives is philanthropy, reaching out, people, the wealth, the wealth is communities, the wealthy individuals, or the foundation is the philanthropy foundation is to invest in some of the works that's happening in the continent. One of the few philanthropists which are heavily invested in Africa includes the Gates Foundation, for example. You will see the Mastercard's Foundation. They are investing a lot of some of our work, especially in the development, especially in the green, by investing in young people through education system, by offering grants to NGOs who are doing climate resilience, climate adaptation work in the local communities, and so on. So green philanthropy is a very critical in the fight against climate change, in the fight against climate shocks, in the journey of green transition and green revolution in Africa. And I think we Africans, we are at the moment of putting together all our efforts and mobilizing the resources needed to invest in this transition. So philanthropy is a very critical and it's very much needed. And sometimes it's not only limited to financial source, but also the knowledge, the know-how, the technical knowledge, the human, expertise, bringing them back home and putting together a team, assembling team, and working on some projects that benefits both the people and the planet as well.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for that. And I think some of the most important things that you highlighted in your intervention is the fact that in order for us to be able to implement whatever development agenda we have, it's specifically in our climate space or the environmental space where we're working, both you and Hamza and I, some sort of financing has to be directed towards that. And that's where then green philanthropy comes in. And I think that was an important point to raise, because then otherwise all of these can just remain as plans, as things in the pipeline instead of them being implemented. You talked about agency also, the importance of how the grassroots or the most impacted can actually access assistance in all of this. And I think I just want to bring it home a bit for you, even in the work that you do with ICE and the young people in your home country. How do you, just briefly, how do you see green philanthropy contributing to climate resilience, particularly in your home country? Are there ways, any examples you could share, or how ICE has been impacted by green philanthropy to enable and advance your mission?
Yeah, very good question. Actually, everything we now do is based on green philanthropy, and we run a non-profit organization which is not funded by governments, but funded by non-profit organizations, funded by the private sector through green philanthropy. We are training the next generation of environmental leaders in Somalia. We are bringing together diverse stakeholders to have the critical conversation on financing our national determined contribution to our national adaptation plans, programming for socioeconomic transformation, and all these things we are doing as an institute is supported by philanthropy, supported by people who are really believe in our mission, believe in our values, and willing to support in resilience building in the country through awareness raising, through capacity building, through the young people, through bringing together stakeholders and to have a conversation on these issues. So these supports are coming from both local organizations, both our businesses organizations, and both international philanthropic organizations. So we are a non-profit organization. We don't run by profit. We don't generate by revenues. But everything we do is backed by support by philanthropists. Amazing.
And I think one interest that I have in knowing, most people, when they think of philanthropy, they only think of the grant-making instrument as the only way through philanthropy. And I love the fact that you also mentioned that you're working with the private sector. And I think this will transition us to Hamza to say, through the Somali Youth Hub, are there ways that you guys are using or harnessing green philanthropy to ensure that young people in Somalia are accessing the financial instruments that they need to access in order to be able to implement. And also if it goes beyond just grant making, because I think that's another thing that we need to look into, that there's more to philanthropy than just grant making, which is the easiest and the most common one that young people access or use either locally or internationally, as Okash has highlighted. That's how his organization is doing it. But I want to know, at maybe government level in your home country, are there other instruments that you're possibly using to harness the power of green philanthropy to assist young people to advance their missions or climate initiatives?
Thank you so much, and the wonderful question. And to begin with, climate. I mean, it's a huge issue in Somalia, and especially when in one year you can see half of the year there's being droughts and the other half is being floods, and there's a lot of things that is happening in a particular time. But the government itself, Somalia as a government, we have been facing a lot of issues. And that's why now certain think tanks like ICE and other private sectors come on point, is to guide them on how to help the people on the grassroots levels, and to partner with them on how we can do better as government to see how we can shape our policies. But even not even policies, there's certain organizations like SODMA, it's a disaster management agency of the government, that most of the private sector, they work with them to see how they can help the people in the grassroots. For us as Somali Youth Hub under the Ministry of Youth and Sports, we took climate as a serious issue in 2023, and climate it's becoming a very big issue. People are realizing now in Somalia the terminology of climate. What is climate change? How does it affect? What adaptation measures can we take? And people are learning, and they're becoming more aware of this. And the ministry took a strong point, and the agency took a strong point in advocating, first of all, giving awareness on what is climate change and how does it affect people. And when people are aware, that's when people are more open to contribute. As Somalia, as we know, our GDP is comprised of humanitarian aid, and the other rest of the money is on security, which is meant to free the lands that are being held now. So there's not a lot of awareness or advocacy when it comes to climate finance within the private sector and also within the government agencies. But recently, after a lot of last year, I think we have done ELCO with the ICE. There was a lot of recommendations on youth on how to generate those climate finances. And one of the things that we think, or we suggested, was to have more on a community-based helping system. And that's where now community helping system comes on board, because it takes a lot of time now to contact agencies and organization, humanitarian aids, to get money to help the people in the grassroots. But once you have a community-based philanthropy system, and then that's where we think that it might be a change. But also, I would like to strongly support what Okash said, was to also engage the private sector more. The private sector, especially in East Africa, this new terminologies of climate is very new to them. To really make them understand, if they don't support this, they'll be losing a lot of demanding from the other side. So the private sector are now understanding what is climate, how serious the climate is going on in the country, and what is their contribution. And I think that in the last few years, when there's droughts or floods, one of the biggest companies in the countries actually do contribute most of the money, which sometimes can be more of what the government is contributing. But that shows you that the awareness that think tanks and organizations and NGOs are doing in the country is actually working on. Another thing that maybe we are promoting is also green philanthropy when it comes to green skills. Is something that should be learned within the academic systems or education systems. And this is somewhere now people will be more interested to go back to their rural areas and contribute more and go back to their farms, to go back to their livestock, and be part of that community sense. Youths are now leaving the rural areas to the urban areas, which I'm one of them. But at the end of the day, it's getting to know the benefit of having those green skills, the benefit of having those farms. Well, what can they contribute? And if we do those green skills, then the philanthropy will start again. This youth will know the issues of climate and how it's affected by the community, and then it goes back again to the community. So it's an issue. Policies are there, to be honest. The Ministry of Environment of Somalia, the Ministry of Youth have one of our theme 10 pillars. Climate resilience is also there. But it's sad that most of them end up to shelves because there's no funding for these programs. And when there's no funding for such policies to be implemented, then such things happen. And that's why now we're trying to encourage, in the case of Somalia, Somalis to invest in the policies or to implement the policies that the government has introduced without wasting time or without making this policy to be in the shelves. So that's a cases that I wanted to clear out.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And for highlighting the localization element. I think that is very much important. And these are some of the conversations we've been having in the space to say, yes, it's good to look at philanthropy more from an angle or perspective of foreign aid and philanthropy just from the big organizations like the foundations that were earlier mentioned, and trusts and all of that. But I think it's important that you're also looking at it from an inward perspective and also looking at how do we localize philanthropy, and how do we ensure that we build resilience. And I think that's part of building resilience, not just relying on external support or funding or philanthropy, but also utilizing the resources that we have in our home countries. And as young people also championing that, I think it's important. And I think for me, this is also an important point that you're highlighting because I used to look at philanthropy really from just that angle of it's external, it's from the big guys, it's from the big funders and all of that. But when I went deep into what is philanthropy really, it's pretty much anybody can be a philanthropist, from what I've learned, in the definition of the word itself, just as is. And maybe I might actually be a philanthropist, I wasn't aware. So I think it's good to actually look at it from that point and seeing what's happening in the multilateral spaces now. The grounds are a bit shaky. And then with some people pulling out of big agreements, we know who did that, right? the recent developments that have been happening, it's not the first time, but there are surely like environmental rollbacks that happen with such pullbacks. And then even other countries that are developed just outside of the US, for instance, are pulling out of the Paris Agreement. Then you have other big or developed countries, basically the Annex 1 countries, also now are pulling out and saying, oh yeah, maybe they might not necessarily deliver on some of the pledges they've made. And I think it's also one of the issues that come up even at the big conferences that happen, the Conference of Parties. We know what happened at COP29. Most people were disappointed, especially people from my sector in the civil society spaces, complaining about how there isn't enough that's being directed towards climate finance, how there isn't enough that's being, the pledges are not being honored, basically. The developed countries will agree to a certain terms, but now when it comes to like the follow through, then you see that there are huge shortages and gaps, and even sometimes how those pledges are also very short. I don't know how to, like the best English word to use, but they're not necessarily meeting the demand or not necessarily meeting the need that is there, especially by least developed countries which both you guys and I come from. And there's the Loss and Damage Fund. There's a lot that's going on in the multilateral space, and we're seeing a lot of talk, but not necessarily enough in terms of honoring the pledges that have been made. And so I think looking inward to some degree and also seeing how we can utilize some of our local resources and even our youth in the diaspora, or even just our citizens in the diaspora, seeing how we can work together to ensure that we develop our own home countries. I think there's a lot that can be done through that type of model, and maybe that's one way we need to really rethink philanthropy. We need to look at it from more a local perspective, so that we're not necessarily on the negative end when some people decide that they're not going to prioritize maybe us as the most vulnerable countries to issues related to climate. So thank you for highlighting that. And I don't know, what are your thoughts actually? I know you attended COP29, and I want to know what were your thoughts specifically about what was transpiring, even now, before all of this other big mayhem and crazy stuff happening. What were your thoughts around what happened at COP29, especially with regards to climate finance?
Okay. Despite the hectic schedule that we're in, I mean, there's a friend of mine, he kept on repeating a phrase that I took, you have to be very disappointed. A very successful COP is you have to be very disappointed. And we were really disappointed. So I think that was a success COP at the end of the day. But in terms of funding, climate finance, it was a devastating issue to see, because I left on the 21st of November, and some of my colleagues were there until the 24th. And until midnight, there was no agreement on point. So which shows you now that the world is somehow neglecting what is happening. And this actually shows us now that we should be thinking about our own solutions. How can we do our own fundings? How can we be all united, especially in blocks, and do our own thing and get our own finances? And even there's no blocks as a national country, how can you promote to go those funds for the climate adaptation mitigation programs that each country has? Because I think prior to that, there was COP16, and after that there was COP16. The similar issue happened, which was there's no agreement. The money is there, the ideas are there, the problems are actually getting bigger and bigger every day, and it's becoming more devastating to deal with, and still people are getting they're blinding themselves to see the truth in the reality in the ground. So which actually made me think, why do we need now to sit back and just wait for people to approve money and somehow in a very humiliating way, but rather for us to come with our own local solutions and deal with it. And there's some part in Somalia where before this all climate came, and I was doing some reading here and there, and people, our ancestors, they used to know about this kind of thing that is happening. How do they fund? How do they do all this? And there's local solutions that is happening, and there's local solutions that can be adapted, but that adaptations need to be coming from the civil society, from the grassroots, from the youth, and from the private sector, which has the funding, and to go through that. And another point was, yes, a lot of civil society people are very disappointed at COP, because the participation of civil society was not very well taken care of, and this particular COP29. And another point was a lot of demands, a lot of requests that civil society were made were not in the papers. They were not been even suggested. So which gives you in a narrative, in a shell, that international aids and they always impose external solutions. They always forget about what is happening within the ground. So it's gonna be a solution where now we empower local people with our local context specific strategies, and then we go forward. So which means now, since we all know the guy who pulled out of the Paris Agreement, so which means COP30 this year will not be an appropriate place to be, because if there's no fundings and people are pulling out, we must come together and discuss our own solutions, rather than spending millions of dollars on tickets and hotels getting there to speak. But if nothing is done, I think that will be another waste of time and finances. I think that was a shell of what happened. I want to say more, but I want to be more diplomatic here.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for that. I don't know, Okash, do you have anything to say to that? Yeah, what is your stance on the multilateral issues that are happening? Also, just building up from COP29, also as you attended. Yeah, I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you very much. I started what Hamza said on COP29. For the last decades, the world has been experiencing a threat to multilateralism because of the emergence of identity politics, nationalist leaders from so many countries in the world. And that is now resulting in a very fragmented world. We see so many, so many regional blocks are forming. Those are challenging the existing, international order, international institutions. For example, the BRICS is now trying to challenge how things are done. Africa will carry the burden if we don't rethink, if we don't re-engineer the African Union and all other our regional or continental institutions. The whole point of COPs was to have actual conversation, and whoever done the wrong, especially those developed economies, should pay the price of climate crisis. But now that has never happened. For instance, since Paris Agreement, the pledge were never fulfilled, especially when it comes to funding. And now we see the United States putting out again the Paris Agreement. I think it is time for Africa and the global South to reassess their engagement with the COPs, with their engagement with the UN FFC. What is the point of now going again and again to these COPs? And while there's nothing happening at the ground level, the victims, the households, the farmer in the far rural areas in our countries who are affected by climate has nothing to do with COPs. They have no understanding about what's happening in COP. And we're investing our own money, which we already taxed from them, and flying to Azerbaijan, to Dubai, and nothing again is coming back. So I think it is time to Africa bloc, these regional blocks, to come together and think about the faith, for their future when it comes to climate adaptation, to climate funding. And again, this will come back again to the question of governance. How are we governing our countries? How are we generating resources? What has to be done? What new modalities of funding do we need to engineer? How do we increase our domestic resource mobilization efforts? So I think if that conversation starts, I think it will be a conversation of transforming our economies, transforming our social structures, which will deliver prosperity, I think, at the end of the day. Because if every region sits together and thinks about their future, I think it's the better for themselves rather than waiting, others. I think we can never transform our economies from a taxpayers' money from American citizen, from European citizen, at any point. So I think the future is in hand of us, our leaders, whether we are leaders from the civil society or leaders from the private sector or the public sector like Hamza, to have this various conversation and come out with actual conclusion. So that's what I do think. I'm not sure how our leaders, especially the political leaders, will be committed to this, because this is something which has been said for the last 60 years, since we got independence as African countries, since the African Union was established. So it needs really a high-level conversation from our political leadership, from our elite. We need to get an elite consensus on this and political will. But we the young people, we are the leaders from the civil society and youth organizations. I think we have to boost this agenda at the national level, at the local level, to global level. So I think we have to play our role. But much of the work is being relied on the political leaders.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that. And I totally agree with what both you gentlemen have shared, because I think at some point I was a bit too disappointed, and it's easy to really just go into that dark abyss of hopelessness because of the turnout of events and what is happening in the world. So in my case, I've really been rethinking how we do things with my fellow counterparts here locally, with my other young people that I work with. And what you guys are sharing is very much resonant with me, because I looked at it, I said, yes, we're part of the globe, we're part of the bigger picture. And of course, whomever is doing in whatever part of the world definitely does affect us. The climate phenomenon is really just a true testament of that we're the least emitters, but we're the most vulnerable, we're the ones facing the most negative impacts, and we're the most ill-prepared. I think Hamza mentioned earlier, talking about issues of DRR, like disaster risk management. And I think we really do have to rethink the way we're doing things. And looking at it from a local perspective doesn't necessarily mean that we're seeing ourselves as an island, but I think it really does call for a rethinking of how we do things. And that's part of the ways that I'm already starting to engage with my government, and then also just championing other young people to say, let's come on board, let's be part of these important conversations so that we'll be able to influence and shape the conversations that happen at that level. And then you also mentioned the issue that the policies are almost so high level, and then not necessarily trickling down to the grassroots level, and this is where people are being really impacted. And how do we help the grassroots to understand what is happening at these high level platforms? And how do we ensure that we customize, we contextualize, we bring it down to a level? And this is an important conversation we need to have. Maybe we should actually set up some conversations where we could, like through your think tank, Okash, like through institutions like ICE, where we're just having conversations as young people to say, okay, here's this problem, how do we actually do it? Let's actually have a conversation and maybe a brainstorm of sorts to say, what are the things that we can possibly do to ensure that we're not left in the dark, or we're not left at the sidelines as people make certain decisions that prioritize themselves. Yet we know we need to be adapting because the impacts are already happening. And then also in instances where we're able to mitigate, then how do we already set ourselves up to ensure that we mitigate some of the climate risks? So it's an important conversation. And maybe my call to action for us, the both of you, is that we should start thinking along these lines, how maybe have a brainstorm of sorts where we're going to discuss such to say, now in practical terms, in a practical way, what are the things that we can possibly do to rethink green philanthropy? What are the ways we can rethink how we're being financed, or like climate finance in general? Because I know, for instance, I've been part of some processes in my home country that were related to accessing financing from the Green Climate Fund, like the famous GCF, right? And it's not easy to access such because there's so many bottlenecks, there's so many barriers. And like you said, even the tenure, sometimes it takes a while, for years, actually 3-4 years, to qualify for some of these funds. And then you need accredited entities to do that. So there's so much that's happening that's not necessarily assisting to make the processes much easier and making these types of funds that are meant to be assisting with adaptation and mitigation to be accessible. So I think we really need to have such conversations. So I just want to get back to you, Hamza, to say, so are there ways through the Somali Youth Hub, or even through your government, as a young person in the government space, which I'm happy about, because we need more young people also infiltrating these spaces where they're able to influence policy and where they're able to be part of the decision-making processes. Are there ways in which you're also advocating for young people to be part of these processes where they're part of the decision-making processes? Yeah. I think that's my question, basically.
That's very important. I mean, in terms of Somalia, youth is a very integral part. I think 75% of our population are comprised of youth. And you can imagine how young the population is and how the energy they have to change and do a lot of good things. And if you don't channel those energies to a proper ways, then other things might happen, which we're also facing, unfortunately. But for the government of Somalia, there was the National Transformation Plan. It was been worked on last year. It is a transformation plan where now and youth are an integral part of it, but also there's a climate pillar where there was a debate on if this climate pillar should be in the National Transformation Plan for a while. But again, they have seen the reality in the ground and people are talking about it. So it created in a policy way, we are very much shaped. The youth, Somali youth have the National Youth Policy, which includes climate. We have the National Transformation Plan. We have the NAP, we have the NDCs, and all are very beautiful, very well. And also youth were very good component. They took a very good part when the consultations and when those things were written, which means we are very well consulted. And now the problem is implementation. Are we part of the implementations? How can we be part of the implementations? Can we be in the decision-making rooms when certain things are going wrong? Can we give suggestions? And the government actually been trying, and that's why the Somali Youth Hub was established a year and a few months ago. And within that, actually, last month we have established our National Youth Council. Within the National Youth Council, we have a Department of Climate and Environment, which actually shows you the importance of the government has. But also what we thought that might not be enough. We need to be more engaged as a government with the private sectors. We need to be engaged with think tank, with the universities and academicians. We can't be doing everything because we can shape the policies, we can guide the structural part, but we need the knowledge, we need the expertise for this to go. And that's why we are, as Somali Youth Hub and the Ministry of Youth and Sports, and we are now trying to engage a lot with academic institutions. We're trying to engage more with private sectors, try to bring a solution for this. And I'm proud to say that before yesterday, we had a very good MOU with CIMAT and ICE, with CIMAT University and ICE, and which actually opens a door for other universities to come and other private sectors and collaborate. What can we do? And another thing that we have done is to enlarge the conversation of climate in the country. And ICE, CIMAT, the Ministry of Environment, were hosting a lot of events last year. I think we had last year was, in my perspective, we had more climate events than usually security events that was going on in the country, and which is something really good. A lot of youth are actually taking part in the process. But also last year we had another good year, which we had our first ELCO in Somalia, and this actually shapes our input in the global statement. What are we thinking? What our suggestion? And it was an eye-opening for us to be in that global conversation. And another issues that we're also thinking as a ministry and as Somali Youth Hub is to supporting green jobs creations through partnership with our local organizations. How can it be done? That's something that we also need to work on it. Another thing that we're also trying to encourage is to invest youth through green philanthropy. To create green industries, job creations driven by green skills. We're also trying to work on how to build a youth-driven climate action, strengthen communities. How can we have a very strong civil societies comprised of youth, led by youth, and for them to really be advocates on climate. And there's also one issue that we are also on the pipeline that we're discussing is innovations, climate innovation centers. It's a very important place now to bring experts, youth who have a very well talented youth to come and innovate some solutions when it comes to climate issues and adaptations. And I think that in Somalia now we are in a very good stage when it comes to youth in climate. Youth, I think most of the youth are understanding what is climate. Most of them participate what is climate. One memorable thing that keeps coming to my mind, and even though it made me seem to be very old, but there was Simet University and Okash team has hosted a hackathon where youth were presenting ideas on climate adaptation. And they were presenting an amazing ideas and something that I myself might not be thinking at that particular age when I was their age. But now is for us now to take those well-talented youth and finding fundings for them through green philanthropy, through private sectors, through community-driven communities, and then now to get them to the next level. The Somali Youth Hub now is actually closely working with the Minister of Environment. We are actually now trying to see how those innovation centers can be a reality. And I think that will bring more talent source to the ground. Another issue that I want to end with is sustainability. And the civil society in Somalia and the private sector, the government, should actually be the leading force when it comes to sustainability. Sometimes the government is being blamed that we are preaching something, but we are doing other things. And sometimes might be true, but at the end of the day, it's the finance that we have. We don't have enough resources for that. But we're trying our best to do what we plan to do and to be role models for those young people, to see that even though youth are in decision making, but we are trying very hard that the loophole that sucked other youth in the politics we should not be part of that process. But again, and we're hoping this year will be another year for a change, but also another year of more awareness to be done, but to be focused more on climate finance within our own aspects. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for that. Just quickly, I think we're going to be wrapping up our conversation, but I just wanted to quickly get to you, Okash, to say, just as a build up to that, what Hamza has shared, are there any specific initiatives or projects that ICE has been partaking in specifically in harnessing like the power of green philanthropy to assist young people's initiatives? Are there like any real life examples you could possibly share to say we probably assisted young people in this manner or in this way through green philanthropy as ICE, just to give us a bit of a few examples?
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Rex. Well, as I said before, everything we do is guided by support by green philanthropy. For instance, I have a team of advisory board members who are not necessarily, fellow Somalis, but coming from different countries, and they are supporting the institute to attract, partners, fundings, and also contributing to create a knowledge through our research and policy advocacy process. And we don't pay them, so that is, a support we found through philanthropy. And we do a number of interventions. For example, every month we host something called Climate Conversation, where we bring a very key figure from government or from civil society, from the local community, to have a conversation on these issues. How do we attract more funding to our local intervention programs? How do we accelerate the green transition? How do we invest our renewable energy? And so many things. So apart from that, we have a number of youth-led, youth Fox programs. For example, climate innovation programs, where we bring together young people who have brilliant ideas through design thinking principles, through foresight, come up ideas by targeting, the SDGs, by aligning their solutions with the national development priorities, and coming up solutions. And by the end of the process, when they come up with solutions, we connect them with the banks, we connect them with the philanthropic organizations, we connect them to anyone who can support them for accelerating, for scaling their initiatives. And we also host annual events like the LCOI, which is a very important platform for young people to have these conversations on climate and climate issues and what could be the voice of the young people to be amplified in the global forums like the COPs, whether it is the COP30 or the COP of Land or COP of CBD and so on. Last year, we hosted a very important gathering called Climate Symposium. And the idea, it was just to bring together different stakeholders, including the local communities, those who may not usually have their voice in the table, the marginalized communities, the IDBs, and to join the conversation and express themselves from their point of view, and then to work with them to design a local-led adaptation solutions that can deliver impact. What usually happens is some few people may come from government or may come from development organizations, come together and think for the people to design something, and that they may think will be impactful. But reality is different. Every sector, every stakeholder, they are working in silos. Why can't we bring them together and think together and co-create solution with it might deliver impactful results to the people, usually those who are majorly affected by the crisis. So, I mean, we are doing a number of interventions, and most of them are done in good faith. Most of them are done in volunteer work. Most of them are supported by philanthropists, with our local philanthropists or external, philanthropists, not necessarily in grant making process, but also experience sharing through, advisory services, proponent service, and so on. So I think we have a lot of way to go. This intervention is in the climate space are very new in Somalia. They are not more than 5 years old. Everything we are now doing is the tip of the iceberg, and I hope with the partnership of different stakeholders, we will further, accelerate our efforts, including the recent, partnership mentioned by Hamza. Yesterday, I was at the Minister of Youth. I've been working with Youth for the last 2 years, and yesterday we agreed to formalize our agreement through MOU, and that is the same I think we are doing with the rest of entities, not necessarily from government, but also maybe other universities from global south, global north, maybe banks, maybe private sector, maybe local entities, and so on. But I want to highlight is everything we do in the climate space, in the green space, has to be a local-led adaptation solution, local-led solution, local-led, driven, solutions. If you don't collaborate with those people who are majorly impacted by climate shocks, we are not delivering actual results. We are just doing, things, for undefined reasons otherwise. So we have to work with them. We have to work with the underserved communities, marginalized communities, so we can measure the impact of those interventions.
Great for those insights, and I totally agree with you on how important it is to really have that human-centered approach that you talk about, to say how do we ensure that our solutions are place-based, one, and yes, within our context, and of course they're prioritizing the people who are actually in need of this type of support. And I really appreciate the fact that you mentioned that, because it's the most important thing. And I think it's sometimes with finance, it's so easy for like, as Hamza mentioned earlier, for external parties to really impose some of the solutions, to say, oh, this is what should be done. Or these types of fundings, when they come in, they come with their own terms that are not necessarily meeting our needs or our own local contextual issues. So I really love that insight you share about like ensuring that we use a human-centered approach, and of course ensuring that our solutions are place-based, even as we're attracting funding from all different models, or however, like different types of finances that we can attract. And with that, I want to invite you, Hamza, in closing, really, because I think Okash has pretty much shared what I would regard as his closing remarks, by highlighting that the importance of a human-centered approach and place-based solutions. I don't know, do you have anything you want to share about yes, the power of green philanthropy in supporting or as a pathway to supporting youth development and climate resilience. Like parting shots before we go into our Q&A.
Oh yes. But I'll just end it to two short notes, which is, and we really need to think and design on how we as Africans can rethink what it will be our future when it comes to climate and green philanthropy. And why I'm saying that is because 2023 we had the African Climate Week, but in 2004 we did it, and there's a lot of politics that is going on here and there. So we need really to focus on how we can re-engineer the way that we can make a decision as a continent or as a bloc. Another thing is locally is we need to promote more, give more time, and learn on how we can get more green philanthropy through our communities, through our private sectors. Through grants, through international aids and humanitarian organizations, it takes time. And you're spending 3, 4, 5 months applying for it, and then and waiting for another few months to get a reply, and then you get rejected. So which you wasted a whole maybe 6 months applying for one grant, but rather to re-engineer and rethink and give plans on how we can engage more in the private sector and get local green philanthropy initiatives can be going on, but also try to promote how this case can be successful. If Lesotho, you're doing very good and you're getting green philanthropy through local communities, and then it's for you to share now with your partners in Somalia, the same goes to us to create a network of how we can successfully do green philanthropy through youth initiatives, through other means of engagement. And I think that will be something that as a challenge for all of us for this year, and hopefully that we'll be sharing more on what will be our cases of approach when it comes to these perspectives.
Great. And I think it's great that we're actually having this conversation at the beginning of the year, because then it means that there's ample time that we can use to come up with these solutions that we're talking about, to say, how do we rethink, what are these models, what shape or form do they take, and now really breaking it down to a more granular level and ensuring that it's easy for such to be implementable. So thank you so much, gentlemen, for sharing your insights on this important topic. I know there's so much to talk about and we have limited time. I think we've gone way beyond our hour, but I enjoyed just hearing your thoughts and insights on this important topic. And I think some of the most important messages that are really coming out of this is the importance of having a local perspective, or contextualizing, or finding place-based solutions, or coming up with place-based solutions. And then also the importance of a human-centered approach. And then I think what you mentioned, Hamza, now, as you were closing, the value of sharing good practice, really, amongst ourselves, and not just hoarding information, but creating such platforms where we discuss such, and also now going further, coming together to discuss, to say, what's the best way? And then some people sharing to say, this is what I did and this is how it worked in my home country. And I think we've been able to do that with the two of you in our different ways in the past 2 years that we've known each other and started working together. And I really appreciate the fact that we can do that. And there's so much power in us uniting to come up with solutions for our home countries and our home continent that are solving our own problems. And I think it's important for us to call on more young people to join us as we continue to do such, whether we're working in the governance spaces or even just at the grassroots through like civil society organizations. So it's important for us to have that broad approach where we're not just isolating to say, oh, we're just going to focus on the grassroots or a civil society, because then where the policy is made at governance level. So we also have to infiltrate those spaces to ensure that we're influencing even in that space. And I think that's one big mission that I also have at this point in my career, and in my path in the development sector, to say, how do I ensure that I bring lessons from the grassroots to the governance spaces, and then also to ensure that these two sides are not going against each other, but are instead collaborating and working together to ensure that we have a greater impact, and not just for our home countries, but also just moving across borders within our continent, and ensuring that we have a reimagined Africa that we're looking for. So with that said, I want to just hand over to my colleague, Thembi. I don't know, Thembi, do you or anybody from the AYPN, are there any questions you would like to ask myself and my colleagues? Or are there any important points that you just want to reiterate or highlight based on this conversation that we were having around green philanthropy as a pathway for youth development and climate resilience? Over to you.
Thank you, Rienkeritwe. I hope I pronounced that right finally.
Yes, you
I've been
did. Yes, you did. You've been practicing. I love this.
I'm so sorry I can't come on camera, my network. Thank you, three, so much. I think I'm on like 4 pages of just note taking, because for me, climate has not been a focus area that I've really paid attention to in my work. I've been more on on the broader youth development agenda, and now African philanthropy. And so for me, this was a learning moment. And so thank you for that. You guys really unpacked some critical points and critical issues that we also need to think on as African philanthropists, but more importantly, as a young people. I don't think I have questions, but I do want to warn you that you are now part of the Thembi ecosystem, the AYPN ecosystem, and we will be calling on you for different things. And so thank you. It doesn't stop here. It doesn't end here. I'm going to be bothering you guys for a lot more stuff going forward, because I do believe that we are stronger when we're banded together. And we do want to achieve something. We all have to just pull that strong force of unity and solidarity, and that's how we are heard. And so thank you for all of that. This recording will be made available. I'll share it with Rex. I think I followed both Mohammed and Hamza on LinkedIn, just so we also stay connected on that lanes. Thank you so much. Let me not, I know it's like 5 p.m., almost 6 p.m. in East Africa. And so I don't want to keep you for long. We have 12 of these already scheduled for the year, so 1 each month. I have a feeling we're gonna end up with like 2, sometimes 3 per month, because young people are coming in, more people are coming in to bring their own focus areas to the fore that I had not thought of. And so if you guys want to join those, you feel free. If you want to introduce me to someone that you think belongs to have a conversation in this platform, to have this, more than happy. I have an open door policy. So thank you again. That's it from me, if you have nothing else to share with us.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm happy for us to really close it off. But I think you mentioned another thing that is quite important about how you were focusing on other development issues. But another thing that has been coming up is how intersectional the issue of climate change is. It touches on different aspects of society, and it also affects and also advances some other social injustices. So it's not just an issue it's quite a cross-cutting issue. And I think that's why it's important for us to be collaborating as people who come from different sectors, because it's not just affecting the environmental space, but it's affecting other social justice issues that are so important, whether it's education, whether now we're talking about financing and the environment. And so I think it's important for us to keep on having these conversations. So thank you so much, Thembi and the AYPN for this platform. So yes, yay.
Thank you, and it's a wrap.
Awesome.